Right, let's see if this works. I don't know what just happened there. Well, let's see if this is working. I don't know. Is this working okay? I don't... It just suddenly went dead. Yeah, what is going on? What is this? Is this the... Is this the curse of Mirza Ghulam himself? Right, so I'm just going to share this again. Right, so... Alright, people. Alright, we is back. We is back. Right, lo siento for that. I don't know what's happening. It just suddenly froze and then just... I couldn't see anybody online. I could just see myself. And the live thing kind of just disappeared on it. So, have I blocked all the trolls? I mean, they should be blocked. I'm just trying to straighten this. Right, so, I don't know. Mulvi Jins. Right, so this thing that I was saying, bloody hell, this is getting a bit annoying. Right, so this thing that I was reading about Ibrahim alayhi salam, it was quite fascinating. It was stating that, see, some of these things were saying his family that he came from were Brahmin, were Indian Brahmin. And this thing, they were demonstrating links between Brahma and Abraham. And this whole thing of how they were trying to say that he was like, this is like the story of Brahma in some ways. So you had how Brahma has his wife, the wife of Brahma, the Hindu deity, is Saraswati. Okay, Saraswati. But Sara is her name, Swati, like pure, Sara, pure, like Saraswati. And they were saying, well, and his wife was called Sarah. And they were saying, they were drawing all these parallels about how he, for example, had gone off from, he was kind of in touch with that civilization. He was Brahma, he was kind of, this was his belief, and that some people believed he was he was Ram, and hence Abram, like Father Ram, they were calling him. And then his name is changed, and some people, it was interesting that they were saying that the ihram, for example, that he wears is very similar to what the priests and the Brahmin and those people wear in the Hindu culture. And there was a few articles I was reading, and they were trying to draw out some of these similarities, and it was just intriguing. It was like, okay, and they were trying to say, well, if you look at the how, for example, pelting the stones, and they said this is similar to this kind of ceremony that is ritual that is conducted here by the priests, and this and this, and it was just, it was fascinating. That's all I'd say. That they were trying to say that his ancestors were from that Indus civilization and the Indus Valley civilization, and that he too had contact with that and was familiar with those kind of teachings and things like this. I mean, I don't know. It got me curious from a genetic perspective. I wonder if science could maybe shed some light on something like this. That would be surely fascinating. So that's right. So that's that. But that definitely was some fascinating kind of research, and some of these things anyway about the names and the practices and the ihram and the ancestors that came from, because the Bible mentions that Abraham's ancestors came from the east of Ur, that although he was in Ur, but from the east they came. So this is where they were kind of making these links, and interesting. So if anybody does have research on that, do send it my way, please. I'm definitely fascinated I'm definitely fascinated in learning more about that. I mean, were there any links between the Indus civilization, Abraham? It's an interesting discussion. Right, people, so I wanted to take a look at this, have a review of this Islam Unboxed. Okay. Right. I'm sorry, yeah, some people saying, was the feed interrupted? Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It just got interrupted. It just suddenly, and that's it. It just disappeared. Right, so I'm going to bring up some... Right, I went through... Whoa. Just seeing the amount of... the amount of things open. Close them quickly. Phone nowadays, you can't hand your phone over to anybody, can you? This day and age, it's like it's like you have a choice. You're gonna have to meet. It's gonna be death by firing squad, or you have to just give your phone to everybody. You have to just open it up, and people are like, go on then, death by fire. Well, it's been a good life, I'll say. I'm joking, yeah, I'm joking. So, what is going on? Yeah, so this Mufti Abu Layth, Imam Tawhidi, Sasha Baron Cohen. Yep, is he? Okay, that's interesting. What about the Ḥajjāj story? Yeah, I went through the Ḥajjāj story. Didn't I mention the Ḥajjāj? I was mentioning, unless you guys got interrupted. Did you get interrupted whilst I was mentioning the Ḥajjāj story? Because I did finish it off, but I don't know if you guys... God knows what was happening on that end of the screen. In the Ḥajjāj story, I was just mentioning how... Oh, it got cut off. Ah, right, okay. So the Ḥajjāj story, I was simply saying that he was... that there was a person who kind of tells him off during the khutbah. So he's doing his khutbah and the person says, look, that's enough now. All right, calm yourself. Bahut ho gaya, that's it, calm down. If it's time to pray, like, you should do the salah now. So Ḥajjāj says to one of his henchmen, one of his soldiers, he says, this guy seems a bit too eager to get to paradise. I think, can you send him there, please? So they kill the guy, for God's sake. It's like, what the hell? It's like, yeah, so that's a bit sad. But I was trying to say, you know, those people who are so eager. They're like, and so this was Ḥajjāj, for God's sake. He was a tyrant. But he was an eloquent tyrant, I gotta say. He was an eloquent, you know, an eloquent bar. If he was so particular about the Arabic language, so particular, and he used to kind of be very proud of his Fusha and his clear Arabic, and you know, and they say that he once he heard a person in a poem use a word, which Elizabeth said, I'll stop being so keen. Well, at least some amongst us are keen. The rest of us are just so like, oh, is it time to pray? Is it? Oh. Let's go back to sleep. So this is so as I was saying about Ḥajjāj, that he heard somebody once say a poem, and in the poem he used a word on a scale. Like, so in Arabic, all words fit on certain patterns and scales. All words, pretty much. I mean, most words, nouns, pretty much. So he heard a pattern that he wasn't familiar with. So he called the person and he said that, you know, you've said this poem, and where do you get this word from? And the guy said, yeah, you know, this is an authentic Arabic word. He said, authentic? He said, Puttar, I'm going to show you authentic. He said, you better go and bring me a classical poem with this word or this pattern in there, this scale of this word. And if you don't do that, then Areo Samba. he said, Putter, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you authentic. So he said, I will execute you. There's no him showing you it doesn't mean anything else, people. Make no mistake. It's the gallows, okay? It's game over. So that guy spent a whole year. He traveled and went to the deserts and found some nomad Arabs and asked them for poems with that scale and this. And then eventually, it was like a year later, he found a word in Arabic, a poem with a word that had that scale. And he was so glad. He was so glad. And he was heading back to Baghdad. And then he heard the news that Ḥajjāj had died. And he said, I don't know which one makes me more happier. The fact that I finally found this word, or the fact that Ḥajjāj has died. Ḥajjāj is one of those tyrants of Islam. You see that people, they didn't, this is why they had this very mixed emotion. Not mixed emotion, they just hated him. There's no mixed emotion about Ḥajjāj. They just hated him. It was as simple as that. And it's said about him that once he was drowning and some guy saved him. Obviously the guy didn't know, like he saw somebody drowning, he jumped in and saved him. And everybody cursed that guy. They were like, you good for nothing. You know, for God's sake, the guy's drowning, let him drown. It's like, why have you got to be so Mr. Humanitarian and save the guy for God's sake? But yeah, so Amani, alright. ¿Qué tal? ¿Qué tal? Is that the same person who raised an army to save a Muslim woman from the enemy? I'm not so sure he did, Ḥajjāj, although he was kind of responsible, they say that, for dispatching the army or kind of overseeing the army that went off to conquer Sindh, which is Muhammad ibn Qasim, who went off in India, basically. So Muhammad ibn Qasim was sent during his time, and he kind of, I think, oversaw the dispatch of that army, although he wasn't with them. But later on, he called back Muhammad bin Qasim and killed him. That was his trophy for having conquered India, or that part of India, which is modern day, probably part of modern day Pakistan. And this is within a century of the Prophet. So Muhammad ibn Qasim goes there and they conquer it. And this is the first time Muslims fought against elephants. They had no idea how to handle elephants. I mean, they saw elephants charging at them. They're like, huh? They're like, too late. It's trampled them. So this was the first time they came in contact with elephants. They're like, what the hell? I mean, not the first time they came in contact with, but as a military tactic, like people riding elephants and charging at you. This is like, they were like, what movie have we just come into? Is this Tarzan? Hold it there, mate. Have you got no shame, for God's sake? There's one thing you want us to fight you, but for God's sake, how are we supposed to fight an elephant? You taking the mick, mate. You taking the... So anyway, he fought, but then Muslims strategically, they brought in the catapult. This one clever, you know. And the catapult was never used in India before. So it was like, what the hell is that? And so eventually they took over Muhammad bin Qasim and he ruled, and then he was called back and then he was killed. Ḥajjāj, I believe, was kind of responsible. They said that they accused Muhammad bin Qasim of having an affair with Sita, the queen. Sita ji, Sita. what is it? Jo Sita ne paya Ram mein jo. What is it? Radha ne paya Sham mein. So with Sita, the queen of that region, they claim that he got a bit naughty with Sita ji. But in all honesty, come on, that's nonsense. They wouldn't kill a governor just for having an affair. Come on. We've got to be dumber than dumb to buy that one. You know, like they really care. Like the governors really care that, oh, he had an affair. Oh my God. There was obviously politics, power, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, so yeah, the king, I've forgotten the king's name, but his wife's name was Sita. Sita ji. Sita or Gita. They were twins. They weren't twins. That's just a wrong. Sorry, I'm adding from my imagination. But that's an old Bollywood movie, Sita or Gita. So, it wasn't a Muhammad bin Qasim fantasy. It was just Sita with him. So Bechara got killed for no reason. You see, politics. Ḥajjāj ibn Yūsuf. This is the problem. You know, the problem. So anyway, and they say that there's a hadith that the Prophet said that there will be two people from Bani Thaqif, from the tribe of Thaqif, that one will be a liar, an imposter, and the other a tyrant. And they say the tyrant was obviously Ḥajjāj, and the imposter was Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, who claimed to be the Messiah and then received revelation and things like that. Anyway, right, so what have we got to people? Let's move on to this review. So those of you that watched... Alright, what's this? Somebody's sending me a question. Oh, right, okay. Right, so those of you that have watched Islam Unboxed, it's a debate between Daniel Haqiqat and Imam Tawhidi. So now, and it's being hosted by Amin Nawabi, right now, who is an ex-Muslim. He's an atheist. And then you've got Daniel Haqiqat, who is a Harvard graduate, but an interesting person who has some of the most bizarre Islamic views, right? So you have him. But then you have on the other side Imam Tawhidi, who is no less of a character. So this debate, now I'd done a summary of part 1 before. They had part 1 on YouTube, and then they've just recently released part 2. Now in part 1, it was quite evident that Imam Tawhidi seems to have the clear upper hand, and Daniel Haqiqat seems to be really making unfortunately a fool out of Islam and out of people that he represents by conceding to things like, yes, we believe the Quran was part of the Quran was eaten by a goat. Speak for yourself, mate. Who's we? Yeah. Yes, we believe that part of the Quran was eaten by a goat. It's like, no, we don't. Right, so making these kind of concessions was obviously it's a blow against, you know, mainstream Islam and Sunni Islam. So yeah, so I mean, he was accepting this, he was accepting the satanic verses, so part 1 was quite a tragedy actually. In part 2, now part 2 begins for about the first half an hour. It's very lengthy, it's about 2 hours. So the first half an hour, 40 minutes or whatever, it's a bit, it's very petty. Imam Tawhidi is, I think, just disgraceful. He seems to go on and really overdo it with this whole extremism thing. Somebody said, listening live from Brisbane. Alright. Ahlan wa sahlan. Right now, this whole thing about extremism, he seems to really overdo it. He says to what he says to Daniel Haqiqat that, oh, you believe in Umar ibn al-Khattab and these people as great people, these are the fathers of ISIS and these are terrorists and you believe in terrorists. And then he just kept on going on about this. So, oh my God, would somebody just change the goddamn record? It's like, and then he's going on about, oh, you know, Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu an, oh, he was a terrorist, he was an extremist, he was like this, and just goes on about him. And Daniel Haqiqat says that, well, he's named his son Khalid, and then Imam Tawhidi says, oh, so you name your son after a terrorist, and this just goes on, and they just start arguing, and I think Imam Tawhidi was buying out of order in that part, especially the first segment of that part 2, probably, which goes on for about half an hour, maybe stretching into 40 minutes. He really overdoes it, acts like a child, throwing a tantrum. He starts interrupting, going, oh no, but I'm sorry. Amin Nawabi stops him on a few occasions, says, look, you have to stop doing this. He says that you have to stop doing this, let him speak, let Daniel speak. And he says, no, but he's praising a terrorist, Khalid bin Walid. He raped a woman because he took her, and, you know, she never waited her iddah, which is basically like a menstrual cycle after she was with him. She never waited that, and it's called an iddah, and oh my God, and it's transmitted in Tabari, and, you know, and he's just banging on, and it was appalling. Right, appalling. First of all, I think it's ridiculous to be calling people like Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an, or Abu Bakr, or these people the fathers of ISIS. It is utterly unacceptable. That is not, look, you can disagree with their actions. You can disagree. I mean, the Shia obviously don't accept these symbols as their symbols. I accept that. That's their, you know, it's their understanding. Nobody can force anybody to believe something. But this, oh, they're the fathers of ISIS. You're having a laugh, mate. They look, by no standard are they the fathers of ISIS. By no standard. Okay. Now, just because, oh, you're going to say that Umar was harsh in certain things, but if you're saying harsh as in he was very kind of like by the book in everything and very strict, that doesn't make somebody, oh, a terrorist just because they're strict. I mean, this is just stupid logic. And this thing of Khalid ibn Walid, oh, he took a kind of slave girl or something, and she didn't have a iddah. But the same story is narrated about Ali, radiallahu an. And the interesting thing is that, because Imam Tawhidi is from the Shia background, but that story they will justify or say, oh no, it never happened, and people may have made this up about Ali, which may be true. They may have made it up against Ali, because Ali, obviously people had issues with Ali radiallahu anh. But do you not think they had issues with Khalid bin Walid? Do you not think people would make things up there? Do you not? What about the rivalry that occurred between other companions and Khalid bin Walid because of who he was as a commander? Now, I just think these things are petty. There was a point where Imam Tawhidi says to, Daniel Haqiqat, oh, that I've got this riwayah in Tabari, I have this narration in Tabari, and Daniel Haqiqat says, yeah, but these are Shia narrations. And Tawhidi says, Shia in Tabari? Where? Show me, name me one Shia. And that's just because Daniel Haqiqat did not know. Right? But there are so many Shia that Imam Tabari relies on. Amongst them, Abu Mikhnaf is a major from the Ghulatu Shia, a very right-wing Shi'i narrator that transmits most of the narrations that support the Shia kind of narrative within Tabari are through Abu Mikhnaf. And there's others as well, but my point is there are many, to the extent that many people have said Tabari himself was a Shia. I've actually got a book, it's over there right now, I can't really, it's a bit distant, otherwise I'll just pick it up and show you. It's written by Imam the Allama Tamanna Imadi from the Indian subcontinent, the great scholar who, Muhammad Iqbal, the philosopher and poet and scholar of Pakistan, who he had asked Allama Tamanna Imadi, the same scholar, to write about why there was no second coming of Jesus. this is the same scholar that he's got a few books, but one of the books he's got as well is on Imam Tabari and Imam Zuhri, and he highlights how there is a good amount of substantial evidence to demonstrate, and it can be argued, I'm not saying it can't be argued, but there is a substantial amount of evidence to demonstrate that both Tabari and before him Imam Zuhri were actually Shia. Now, it can be challenged. I mean, people don't have to, it's not blindly accept that, but there is a certain amount of evidence to demonstrate that. So this is not, I'm not saying this against the Shia in any way, I'm just saying that makes sense then. If somebody was of a certain understanding, that they would have certain views. But my point here is, Imam Tawhidi just bangs on, and to be fair, he is critical to some extent of Shia Islam as well. It's not like he's pro Shia, although he criticizes, I think, Khomeini, but I'm not sure if he criticizes the whole of Shia Islam. But he is critical of Khomeini, I know that. Right now, right, okay, so the whole thing is that, look, just to clarify here, right? Now, so this whole thing that Imam Tawhidi kept going on about in the first half an hour, just really, it got to the point that I was almost going to switch off. And it really made Daniel Haqiqatjou look so good, because he just looked good without trying. Because now, because now at this stage, everything the other Tawhidi is saying just sounds so bizarre, and he's saying it like a kid, like he's hitting the table and no, and throwing a tantrum, and Daniel Haqiqatjou is just very calm at this stage. And then Daniel Haqiqatjou makes a point about violence, and I'd like to highlight this point first, because there's quite a few points I'd like to go through in this debate, and as a review. He makes a point about violence, and he says that, look, we today as a society do not denounce violence. He says, unless you're a pacifist, he says that, look, the police have the right to enforce the law. So Islam has the right to enforce. Now, I want to highlight that I think, although Daniel Haqiqatjou is onto something here, like a tiny, I think there was some truth, there's like half-truths. There is some truth to what he's saying, that yes, we do believe in the potential to exercise force for a greater good. We do believe in that. As most people, they believe in the potential. They don't believe in just going around exercising force, but they believe in the potential to exercise force if necessary for the greater good. So, for example, preventing robberies, the police catching people, the law being implemented, all of these things, I understand that. However, that is it's a poor analogy to use that in saying that is about we believe you can force certain people, or you can force a certain portion of Islam onto people. That is a false analogy. Okay, so you have to look, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. Okay, so just to clarify that, now there's something they begin. They go into the age of Aisha debate, and this is really sad to see. There is a part which, there is a separate clip. I have seen it on social media as well. Now, there's a part where Imam Tawhidi just outright asks Daniel Haqiqatjou that, are you saying it is justified to have sex with a 9-year-old? And Daniel Haqiqatjou says, yes. I could not believe what I was hearing and seeing. That what on earth are you saying? This is this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. And at this point of the debate, from about 40 minutes into it, Imam Tawhidi all of a sudden starts to appear good again, because he seems to be defending what part of what is just common sense. Now, it's not that Imam Tawhidi, I disagree with a lot of his things, and I disagree, but the problem here is Daniel Haqiqatjou is taking such a ridiculous stance that it's naturally making the other person be the person that everybody can relate to. So Daniel Haqiqatjou is saying things like, oh yeah, I mean, you got to understand that childhood is a modern phenomenon, and this just some nonsensical, bizarre kind of things. Childhood is anthropologists say that childhood in, today, this is just something we've come up with, and blah, blah, blah. And, in the past, people, they never did this, and they were like mini adults and stuff like this. And this is just crazy. This is dumb to the worst degree. And what's absolutely appalling is that, in the name of blind taqleed to your sect and to the Salafi mashayikh or whoever your group is, you are prepared to throw the honor of the Prophet under the bus. I am so disappointed in that I think it's disgusting to see people will easily betray the Prophet just to save face with their group. It's so here, this part of the debate where they discuss this, Imam Tawhidi was spot on. Imam Tawhidi said that, look, I don't believe, and this isn't just about him, other people have said, I've got a detailed video about the age of Aisha. And to be fair, Imam Tawhidi does say to Amin that, look, there are Sunni Muslims as well who say that Aisha was not 9 or 6 or these kind of ages. Amin, who's the ex-Muslim host, he says that no, he's not aware of that, but he is told by Tawhidi that no, they actually do exist, but he doesn't name any. But there are many, and especially in recent times, who've looked into this issue and said that this is utterly unacceptable. So I do urge people, if you're ever curious on this, watch my detailed video, watch other people's videos. It is impermissible, right, under any circumstance, these things. And the fact that you're saying, look, some people in the past, now people have to understand something, I've explained this in much detail in the past, that look, people previously did marry young, we accept this, but they didn't marry that young. Now, people seem to be making a huge jump. Now, yes, in the past, girls got married from anything like 15 down to about 12, in between that age. They did used to marry girls off in the past at that kind of age. They did not used to marry off 6-year-olds, right? Generally speaking, they didn't. That was not the norm. That was not what used to happen. Okay, so people are getting this clearly wrong. Okay, and girls definitely did not develop much faster back then. If anything, they probably developed faster today, if anything, because of the nutrition, the genetically modified food. So if you look at the anthropological studies, you will see the key things that they see for the adulthood onset of a girl. Physiologically, there's 3 things. One is the internal kind of hormonal, which I suppose you can't see. The other is the menarche, the onset of the menstrual cycle for the girl. And the other, the thalaqi, the onset of breasts for a girl. Now, they will show that these things don't develop till about the age of 12 at least. And that's anthropologically. And they show that in the past, it may have been even later because of malnutrition. And today, in some states, these, like in America with a lot of genetically modified food, they may be at 10.5, 11, like that. So these studies are available and people can check them. So now this thing of in the hadith, now that I've mentioned that, look, people have made mistakes, and Bukhari is by no means, Bukhari has several mistakes in it. Please watch my video, Bukhari Gate, to demonstrate that Sahih Bukhari is not so Sahih. It is a good book, it is a great attempt to preserve something, but it is very human. It is human, all too human, okay? And it has many mistakes in there, many mistakes, right? There's many discrepancies, there's contradictions, there's absurdities, there's nonsense, there's a lot, but overall it's good, because when you're looking at almost 8,000 hadith, right, if a few hundred of them are, you know, off, wacko, crazy, absurd, ridiculous, that still makes the overall proportion still okay and good, but you've got to be real about it, okay? So do watch my somebody had mentioned, what about the age of Fatima radiallahu anha getting married to Ali? I do not believe those narrations. There are multiple narrations. There's some narrations that she was 18, 19. That is most likely the reliable, authentic narration. The other narrations that some people have said about whether she was 10 or not, I don't personally accept that. Right, so like I'm saying, the Arabs were not a people that kept dates. Okay, so you have to be very careful in building rulings and concrete facts based on very weak narrations. Okay, so that's something incredibly important. What do I think of the problematic hadith? Please watch my Bukhari Gate video. It's on YouTube. I go into great detail there. The next, they go into a discussion in this about Western intervention. Now, this is an important part. They speak about, there's a point where Armin asks, what do you think Islam has to offer, or what in the modern day and age, and what should the world do? And so Daniel Haqiqat, that the West should stop butting in. They should stop intervening in the Muslim world. And to some extent, that's a that's a plausible plea. I think that's fine. And Imam Tawhidi makes a point about, intervention is of certain kind. Intervention, obviously, there could be good intervention, there could be counter-terrorism efforts, there could be other things he mentions, which I think is common sense, and, that makes sense. There was a point where Daniel Haqiqat mentions about spies. Now, we know that the CIA and these kind of intelligentsia organizations do get up to a lot of nonsense. But in all honesty, I have to say that, look, when you're watching this debate, one of the things that these people don't do is they don't highlight a parallel. Like, what are they supposing? What are they proposing? What are they, like, because he speaks about having spies. The truth is, did Muslim dynasties not also have spies? Of course they did. All dynasties have spies. This intelligentsia is a necessary part of any effective state or effective empire. They need to have intelligentsia out there gathering information for them so they know what to do. That's just the nature of politics and empire and rule. Now, I understand there's harm with that, but that's just it's a fact, I guess. I mean, it happens. I'm not saying it's a great thing, but the way he was bringing this out as though this is just a modern issue, as though in the past Muslims wouldn't have this, then that's not true. Muslims did have this. There's an interesting point where Daniel is asked, what are the problems with modernity? And he comes out with, he says the problems with modernity are the destruction of kinship bonds, the loss of meaning, institutionalizations. Now, this thing of the loss of kinship bonds. Now, this, fair enough. I mean, it's true that there is a loss of a decline in family values in the modern world. But the question is that, and he says that there's a loss of meaning. Now, you see, he is then associating this. He goes on to say, well, he gives an example of institutionalizations, that a child is born in a hospital, which is an institution. He goes home, and then the child is later on put into education, which is an institution. Then he goes on into college, institution, which he goes on into work, which is an institution. And all of these kind of things. Right now, Daniel then goes on to say fascism is an exclusive product of modernity. This is an absurd kind of... it's an absurd argument, okay? Because when you're saying fascism, what is it that you're talking about? Like, you're talking about imposition, like authority imposing things. The truth is that all regimes in the past, empires, have been notorious. They have been, like, how do you, whether you're going to take the Ottomans, you're going to take the Abbasids, you're going to take the Umayyads, you're going to take all the Mamluks, the Fatimids, the Ayyubids, the Seljuks, whoever you're going to take, Muslim history has been full equally of tyranny. It's not like it was never a Bollywood rosy kind of everybody singing songs. There was huge tyranny. And you see, you have to understand something. In the past, people, we have to understand something. In the past, most of civilization, human beings, did not live in cities. Okay, the vast majority of human beings, right, throughout most of human history have just been like, I mean, especially since agriculture, have just been like farmers. Okay, they've just lived on farms, they've done agriculture. I think the statistics show, was it like up to maybe 80%, if not more, did not live in cities. Okay, or their versions of cities and towns. So people just lived like let's say they were farmers, their fathers were farmers, their fathers' fathers were farmers. Everybody that they've known, as far back as they've known, were just farmers. Now, they didn't have aspirations. People never really, like, you know, people say today, oh, what would you like to be when you grow up? What would you like to do this? What would you like? Those people would never have even had these kind of ideas that what would you want to be when you grow up, because they've not known ambition. There never was ambition. They were never entitled to rights. You know, people say, oh, today, you know, the governments are doing this. And Daniel Hakikaju mentioned something about, look, oh, the police can today use force to... you know, to do so. You mentioned something about you can have which is a ridiculous example. He mentions later on about you can have a parking ticket and the police can decide to kill you. Which I thought, okay, talk about bloody bizarre analogy. But he said, like, so he uses this analogy, but the point is that, you see, now that would obviously be wrong, right? Or even if they didn't kill you, let's say the police beat you up over a parking ticket. That would be wrong. But this concept of there should be justice is a modern kind of phenomenon. In the past, when these soldiers went through villages, they just did what they pleased. Now, people obviously felt wrong, but there was nobody to go to. There was, I mean, what do you do? There is nothing. They just felt, okay, there is nothing. You know, soldiers just did as they pleased. They just went through. There was no policing system. Okay, and so this whole thing, and this, there was an example that Daniel Hakikaju said about the destruction of kinship bonds. He said modernity is set on destroying kinship bonds. Now, I don't know if modernity is set on that, although I do accept that as we move towards an individualized society, people do move away from family values, and that is a shame, and I do agree with that being a shame. However, you're having a laugh if you think kinship bonds somehow were the epitome of justice. They never were. Yes, family values in and of themselves are great and are something that Islam encourages, and we all encourage. Muslims definitely encourage. However, you just have to look at our history. The whole dynasties were based on kinship. They were so Bani Umayyad, the Umayyad dynasty, gave preference to Arabs, and that to Quraysh. This is a known fact. They looked down on any of the non-Arabs, and they considered them mawali. They considered them like servants, slaves. Now, they did not used to offer them any kind of real respect. I mean, I'm not saying they may not, I'm not saying they used to attack them, They didn't used to necessarily attack them because they weren't in an insecure position to do that. They were in a position of power. In a position of power, people are secure. They don't need to attack people who are inferior to them. But they never used to give them any positions of opportunity. They never used to. So Bani Umayyah, the non-Arabs, even the great ulama in the time of Bani Umayyah, have no real position. They're not given any kind of real due respect. Because Bani Umayyah considered them, first of all, that who are these, in fact, one of the famous caliphs, when he asked one of the scholars, he said, tell me, he said, who's a great imam today? And the person said, Tawus. And he said, oh, him. No, because he's a son of a slave. He's a non-Arab. He said, mention somebody else. And the person said, like, Sa'id ibn Jubayr. He said, no, another slave. Mention somebody else. And every Hassan al-Basri, he says, somebody else. And he keeps going through all the people until eventually he mentions an Arab scholar. And the scholar says to him, the caliph says to him that, he says, I was beginning to get fed up now. If you mentioned another non-Arab to me, he said, I was gonna give you a good beating. That this was the state of, so, this thing of saying, well, because Daniel Haqiqatjou makes a point that there was no supremacists in Muslim history, that Nazis, neo-Nazis, white supremacy is a modern phenomenon, which neo-Nazism in that sense is a modern phenomenon, we accept that, but supremacism, that people feeling superior to others and therefore putting others down based on race or is an old way. This is an ancient unfortunate custom of many human beings, including Muslims. So this is nonsense. Either Daniel Haqiqatjou hasn't studied much of Islamic history, or that's just an absolute blag, right? Because many of these, and he said that today, one of the things that modernity does is it kind of destroys kinship. And if we don't have this, it naturally leads to a sense of tyranny, and it leads to, but look in the past, look at even non-Muslim, look at the Mongols. They're based on kinship. Look at any dynasty in the past was based on kinship. They weren't just because they're based on family, somehow they were full of justice. This is just an absurd kind of response, really. And there was an interesting point that the Ottomans, they had this thing of whenever they came into rule, the Sultan would kill off all the brothers. And they had some of the Hanbali ulama give a fatwa that it's halal in Islam to kill your brothers once you become the Sultan. Because it prevents a greater fitna. And they use the verses of the Quran, al-fitnatu ashaddu min al-qatl. That fitna is worse than murder. So they use that to justify the fratricide of the Sultan heirs to the throne. So this is the kind of nonsense and the extent to which certain people went under kinship, Muslims in the past, using Islam and religion to distort and justify murder. So I think, look, there's good and bad in all society. Using this scenario of saying, yes, it is true that family values have declined today, but to associate the fact that kinship bonds, if there were kinship bonds, somehow we would be living in a just utopia, is bizarre. Now, right, there was an interesting point where Daniel Haqiqatjou mentions that he says, I saw a tweet that said, do I have no purpose in life? Is my only purpose to work 9 to 5 and pay bills? Now I thought, look, okay, that's, it's an interesting point. But the question was that, look, in the past, he said people in the past weren't like that because people in the past had religion. But here there's a few points to understand. Yes, having meaning in life is incredibly important. But it is true there's a few factors. Factor one, that in the past people never thought so much like this because they never had the opportunity to think with ambition. Thinking with ambition as a general phenomenon is a modern event. It's not actually pre-modern. So yes, in the past, people did think with ambition if they happened to be from the aristocrats. Not your common peasants and your common people didn't think like, hey, what ambitions and what is the meaning of life and stuff like that. They didn't think like that generally. I'm sure they may have pondered time to time, but it wasn't, they just got on with it. That's what they did, right? So I think that this thing of like, he says that, look, in the past, the other thing is having meaning in life is important, but let's just take an example of like, let's take an example of like Hinduism with dharma. Okay, now having dharma is to have a purpose in life, to know your role in life. For example, you are of a particular caste, you just serve people, you just do this. You are of the priestly caste, that is your purpose in life. You are like this, you are. But yet we would disagree with that. You see, because dharma, the Hindu religion, is a religion still. They still have God, many of them, and they have purpose in life. Like they have some kind of meanings, but it's not that we would agree with it just because they've got it. So this argument that, oh, modernity has led people to question life in being meaningless, right? Because, and this is the great tragedy of modernity, whereas in pre-modern era, human beings didn't have this problem. That, to some extent may be true, because when you have more luxury, you tend to question things. That is true. And today in life, generally more people have luxuries than they have historically, and they have more free time and more leisure time. But that said, you wouldn't agree with the things in the past anyway. Just because somebody had a purpose according to Hinduism would still be redundant according to you. And there are many people today who find purpose in other than religion. You have to accept that. I mean, there's many countries in the world deemed the happiest countries in the world, or in terms of well-being, and they don't follow religion. So these things I think are some. And then Daniel Haqiqatjou went on about past dictators again, and ethnic empires weren't fascist, and he says that ethnic empires were not fascist because there was no nation state and there was no technological advancement to impose. Now, once again, that's a bizarre statement, because of course they were fascist. Empires were ridiculous tyrants. I mean, that's what they were. That's what they, represented. Just tyranny. There is this right. Moving on. There was this point about. They discuss this verse. They get into a debate, and I think this is worth mentioning. They get into a debate on, has Islam come to serve mankind, or has it just come to serve Muslims and God? And Tawhidi says, look, and Tawhidi, I disagree with a lot of how he says things and what he says, and he does highlight that, look, Islam hasn't come here to serve God, it's come here to serve humanity. Once again, that is partially true, although I don't like the way he put it together. But Daniel Haqiqatjou then quotes the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, except that they worship me. Now, this verse, they both agree that yes, this verse exists, but this verse, Tawhidi says, is for the whole of mankind, so Islam has come for the whole of mankind. I would like to say that this verse, I've explained this before, does not mean that Allah has only created humans to worship Him. In fact, Ibn Abbas said this verse meant إِلَّا لِيَعْلَمُونَ, except that they know me, that they come to know God. And I explained another understanding of this verse, and that was the one that I personally go by, and that is that وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ, right? I have not created them except that as a consequence they worship me. That you see, like, the fact that I created them, they consequently worship me. Like, they worship me because of that. Not that I worship them except to do that. Okay, so that's right. So that's something worth definitely, making a note of. This whole thing of Daniel Haqiqatjou then mentions about the Quran. he says that, look, he says you don't believe. I'm not sure what Tawhidi's beliefs are. Tawhidi makes some comment about he doesn't believe the Quran is perfect. I'm not sure fully exactly what he means. Obviously, I disagree with what he's saying, as in he says it's not complete or something like this. But they don't expand on it too much. Now, Daniel Haqiqatju says, we believe the Quran to be preserved because of its sanad. Now, I want to explain something here. We do believe the Quran to be preserved, but not this sanad. You know, this sanad that people say we have the Quran because we have a chain of transmission. This is just like a bonus. This chain of transmission is hadith science imposed on the Quran. This is not how we know the Quran to be preserved. We know the Quran to be preserved because people taught it en masse. From father to child, they taught the Quran. It was part of the living tradition. That is how we've received the Quran, not through this chain, because this chain that they're speaking of is very isolated. There's only a few people in it, and many of the people in this chain are actually weak. So this is a very hadithi approach to the Quran, which is absurd, because the Quran came before the documentation of hadith. So that's another mistake, obviously. So there's this whole thing. They get to a point where they start speaking about apostates, and this part was terribly embarrassing, because Armin Navabi, who is an ex-Muslim, asks Daniel Haqiqatju, do you believe that I deserve to be killed as an ex-Muslim? So Daniel Haqiqatju says, yes, I do. Which is like, what the hell just happened there, right? So they just so this is so crazy. And then he obviously drops in that, no, but in an Islamic state, which I don't know what the hell that means, in an Islamic state. But anyway, Armin says, okay, fine, let's say there is an Islamic state, and he says, yeah, but you'll be arrested first. And he says, okay, let's say I'm arrested. He says, yeah, but they'll give you an offer to clarify. And Armin says, okay, let's say I openly accept. I say, no, I am an atheist. He says, no, they'll give you an opportunity to repent. And he says, let's say I don't want to repent. I just don't believe in Islam anymore. He says, yes, then you know, there will be capital punishment because some ideas are dangerous. And this is one of the most bizarre and ridiculous statements. First of all, there is nothing in the Quran to mention such a ruling. In fact, if anything, the Quran seems to speak and preach the opposite about la ikraha fi din. There is no coercion regarding the religion. That, you know, it gives man sha'a falyu'min, man sha'a falyakfur. Whosoever wills, let them believe. Whosoever wills, let them disbelieve. Afa anta tukri'un nas hatta yakunu mu'minin. Will you force people until they bring faith? You know, lasta alayhim bimusaytir. You are not somebody to force and impose upon people. These are all verses of the Quran. The Quran, if anything, teaches the opposite. Now, the hadith that they have in Bukhari is a weak hadith transmitted by Ikramah, who was from the Khawarij. And there's many people who've called Ikramah kadhab. Okay, Imam Malik was amongst the people that rejected him, amongst many others. So Sa'id ibn Musayyab, I believe, and a few others. Now the point is that, look, okay, the hadithi discussion aside, what is it that this dangerous idea? What is this dangerous idea? He said, oh, because some ideas, do you agree, have the right to be condemned? And they say yes. And he says, like, let's say Nazism, like neo-Nazis. Would you believe that you have the right to condemn? That's a dangerous idea. Or denying the Holocaust. Now, denying the Holocaust, or denying, let's say, or being, let's say, racist or hate speech, is not the same, for God's sake, as people saying, I no longer believe in something. These are worlds apart. Like, and he says, oh, anybody who denies, let's say, the Holocaust in Germany will be sentenced to, and I don't know where they get this from. He says, can be sentenced to death. It's like, what law books are you reading? Because can be sentenced to death. What the hell are you? What are you smoking, for God's sake? Right? I mean, even if these things, they do carry sentences in certain places, nothing like that though. They're not like death sentences. He said, oh, they can be sentenced to death. It's like, oh, you tried it, you tried it. That was pure BS right there. So he says, Daniel Haqiqat says that, oh, so if you can control speech today, if you believe it's okay to control, let's say, hate speech or right-wing racist speech, then this is the same thing as saying if somebody said, I no longer believe in Islam, because that's a dangerous idea, therefore you have the right to kill him. It's like... It's like, what are you on, for God's sake? Seriously, what? Do you grow your own stuff or do you buy it from some... It's like, I genuinely don't understand how you work that logic. How does that even work? That, oh, because let's just pause there for a moment, people. Let's say this is a dangerous idea. Let's just say. The question is, what is the idea that is dangerous? So, in hate speech, I can give you an example. Let's say in racism, we're saying, oh, a particular race, white supremacists, like you're saying, are saying that, oh, the Aryan race is above other people, they're subhuman, you can treat them like crap, you can do this, you can do that. Okay, now this is hate speech, it incites people to discriminate, it does things like that. Okay, fine. So we would condemn that. But we would condemn that everywhere. Now, tell me, what is it that we are condemning here? Disbelief in Islam. If disbelief, now this is the question, if disbelief in Islam is to be condemned and to be fought against with violence, as Daniel Haqiqat Jew is preaching, then by that, why is it, then by that logic, we ought to be fighting against all kuffar. We ought to be condemning all disbelievers for disbelieving in Islam. And he ought to be following the hadith that the Prophet said, I've been sent to fight anybody who does not say La ilaha illallah. And in fact, if you have time, watch my War Wager Hadith Paradox on YouTube to demonstrate why these people with Hadith dogmatism, that have this kind of form of autism when it comes to Hadith studies, these people, why they get stuck on this Hadith. Because that Hadith they claim is mutawatir, yet none of them accept it. But they ought to, if following their logic. Because here, if the dangerous idea is kufr, then, if the dangerous ideas you disagree with my ideas, you should be... If the dangerous idea is kufr, is disbelief, then all people who possess... So let's say the dangerous idea is racism. Then all people who are promoting racism ought to be reprimanded or taken to task. I agree. I agree. By that logic, you should agree all people who are promoting any form of kufr ought to be taken to task. And now you will hear saying, no, I'm not saying you should fight and force all people or execute all non-Muslims. Because the question would be, well, by your logic, you're saying kufr, disbelief, is such a dangerous idea, it ought to be executed. Which is so dumb. And here, Amin Nawabi, and it's you know, it makes... This is the problem, you see, when you have people like Daniel Haqiqat Jew representing Islam, then it just makes every other person on the platform seem so good. So here, Amin Nawabi all of a sudden seems like a really, you know, like, oh wow, he's got some really decent points. But his points are just common sense. His points were, I agree we should condemn bad ideas, but we should fight ideas, with good ideas. Don't you think so? Rather than just killing the person, for God's sake. That's hardly a solution. Like, I know, he's got a bad idea, let's kill him. Well, there you go. Well, he can't seem to argue his idea if he doesn't have a head. Sit him at the table, but we'll just, we say, well, I'd like to see you argue that without a head. Now, do you still disbelieve? So this is the ridiculous nature, because if you follow this argument through, it does not stand. That first of all, wherever this idea is found, which is amongst the non-believers of this world, who are the majority of the inhabitants of this globe, right? Then are you saying that they all carry ideas that we should execute them over? Which is atrocious. And if you say no, then you've contradicted yourself. And then if you say, well, that's because they never really embraced Islam, then the question is, well, what about born Muslims? At what stage did they actually embrace Islam? Because they're born into it. So they never really embraced, they were just brought up on something. So what age do they decide to choose? So my point is, it is absurd to push these teachings, and it's so disappointing to watch. So when I saw that Daniel Ḥajjāj, I just thought to myself, for God's sake. And you know what was hilarious was Tawhidi tries to make a intelligent point. Which it's one of those things that, when people are talking and somebody just says something and everybody just stops and just goes. You go like, bah. So he makes a point, like because really he doesn't even have to be doing so well, because Daniel Ḥajjāj is doing so terrible that anybody, you just have to, you could put a mute next to him who can't speak and he'd still be like, wow, he's so eloquently outdone him, because he's just doing such a terrible job. And then Imam Tawhidi says, so you believe in chopping off the hand of the thief? And he says, yes, I believe in chopping off the hand of the thief. And he says, no. He says, so if you chop the hand of the thief, how does he pray? I was like, huh? I think I just missed the point. Like, what? Did I miss it? What? Because I'm thinking, what's the great point that he's going to make? Because he says, no. He says, let me say this. He says, if you do believe in chopping the hand of the thief, yeah. I've got him. And then he says, yeah. And he says, well, okay. Well, if you chop the hand of the thief, tell me, how is he going to pray? Well, like this. He goes, I'll just hold this hand from here. Oh no, I'm losing balance. How am I going to pray? I thought, for God's sake, are you for real? I thought, cha. Mia Yūsuf. The old, when the guy comes to a scholar, all dressed up as an imam, and he says, and the Maulvi sits up and, subhanAllah, Allama Sahab's come, Allama Sahab. He says, mashallah, he says, and the person sits down with this awe, and he says, mashallah, muhtaram, respected, what is your isme girami, what is your respectful name? And he says, Mia Yūsuf. Not Yūsuf, Mia Yūsuf. So the scholar kind of goes, he says, it's okay, lads, it's Mia Yūsuf. Meaning, well, I doubt he's going to be a scholar if he can't even read the Arabic name Yūsuf. So the point is that this is it, mashallah. So I got so eager that I even thought, so what's Tawhidi? Because Tawhidi was so confident. That's the confidence you want in life. That confidence, and the confidence some people from India have when they send messages to random women. All right, so this confidence in life, that's the confidence you want. So he's like, no. Oh, I've got him. So, yeah, chop the hand. So, okay, so how is he going to pray? You think like, what? And he goes, well, is this going to pray? He goes, no, because you need to put both hands on the floor when you're praying. You need to do sajda with both hands. And you think, well, genius, he hasn't got a hand. No, but you need to put both hands. That's the kind of confidence, people, we need in life. But yeah, so overall, it was an okay debate. A bit, parts of it were irritating, parts of it were embarrassing for Muslims. Daniel Haqiqatju, with his somewhat hatred for modernity, I don't understand that, honestly. They seem to hate the modern world for some reason. I think, look, the modern world isn't perfect by any standard. It's not a utopia. But we do today live in, we enjoy relatively as a globe, as a people, as humanity, we enjoy more peace than human beings have ever had historically. We today, as collectively, as human beings, as adults, as children, as the sick, as the elderly, as the disabled, as the differently sexually oriented, as the employees, as employers, as whatever, as animals that exist amongst us, not us as animals, but as animals that exist amongst us, as plants, trees, the environment, everything today collectively enjoys more rights as a collective body than ever throughout human history. Now that is an achievement, and that is an achievement to mankind, the children of Adam, and I think that that's something to celebrate. Although it's not perfect by any measure, but I believe nothing has been perfect. So, but he seems to have this hatred, and then there was the really embarrassing part of the age of Aisha. I really, if there's one thing I could erase from Muslim memory, if I had the capacity to erase something, it would be this nonsense that they keep going on about the age of Aisha, embarrassing all of the Muslims. And somebody like a Harvard graduate to openly say, yes, I believe it is justified to have sex with a kid. It's so shocking, this kind of stuff. It's really concerning. And the problem is that they believe it's religious. And this is the problem. So anyway, and then this whole thing of saying that, well... And Armin Navabi made a point where he said that, the Western modernity is what put an end to slavery. And I'd like to say that that's also nonsense, because let's not forget, Western modernity, or America especially, and part of Europe, were notorious in their enslavement and the treatment of slaves, and the way that their phase of slavery has been probably amongst the worst throughout human history. I mean, they would have beat the slavery of the pharaohs and everybody in terms of tyranny, in terms of abuse, in terms of things like this. And there were Muslim scholars as far back as the 17th century, right? Muslim scholars, when slavery was thriving, Muslim scholars in places like Mali and these places who were Maliki, that had passed the fatwa that it is haram to own slaves, right? That because they'd said that this is unacceptable, the trajectory had changed. And this is way before the emancipation, the general emancipation of slaves and things like this. So I disagree that Muslims had not risen to that. They had risen to that as well. I'm not saying all Muslims, but there was an awakening as well amongst Muslims. So I disagree to accept that, it's just solely, only some people came up with it. That's not true. And the fatwas are preserved. So there was this, and then there was this apostasy side, which was ridiculous. But then to top it off, mashallah, we had the genius of Imam Tawhidi make up for it with his with the missing hand. He really that made the whole debate worthwhile, people. That gem of wisdom at the end, right? So cool. So that's This was called Islam Unboxed Part 2. Guys, with that, it's 12:30. Whoa! Right, let's call it a night. As always, people, it's been awesome. Right, inshallah. Any questions, do reach out to me. Facebook, Messenger is always better, by the way. Messenger, but you can on my other page as well. Instagram, Mufti Abu Layth. Twitter, I need to check Twitter, for God's sake. Stop checking it. I need to check it. Snapchat, Malm 2014, MALM 2014. Other than that, remember me in your du'as, people. Take very good care of yourselves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.